Okay, so today we're going to use our ratio and proportion reasoning to do some unit conversions. Here's our first problem. The speed limit sign said that the speed limit was 100 kilometers per hour. Your speedometer in your car is showing miles per hour. So we need to know what the equivalent of 100 kilometers per hour is in miles per hour. So I looked up on Google what the number of miles per kilometer were, and so here's that right here. This is what I found on Google, that 1 kilometer is equivalent to 62/100 of a mile. So if you put it in your ratio table like I did here, it's very easy to see, well, if I just multiply the kilometers by 100, and then I multiply the 62/100 times 100, I would know that I would have 62 miles per hour is the same as 100 kilometers per hour. You can also use your proportion that I set up here, where you have the miles over 100 kilometers is equivalent to 62/100 over 1 kilometer. It's going to do the same thing where you just have to multiply both of them times 100. It's just set up a little differently. You can use either a proportion or you can use your ratio table. Alright, here's our next problem. Your recipe calls for 3/4 cup of sugar. You need to send the recipe to your friend that uses grams, not cups. So how much sugar should you tell him that he needs? You can see here that I know that 1 cup is equivalent to 128 grams. So this is what I looked up on Google. This is what I figured out. So now I just need to figure out, how do I get from 1 to 3/4? And you can take steps in between. So I'm looking for, well, what's a little bridge that's going to link me from 1 to 3/4? And I know that 3/4 is smaller than 1, so I've got to divide. This is just like we have been doing. So I'm going to divide by 4. So I know that I'm going to have 1/4 of a cup. And if I divide the top number by 4, I also have to divide the bottom number by 4. So 128 divided by 4. 12 divided by 4 is 3. 8 divided by 4 is 2. So I know that 1/4 of a cup is equivalent to 32 grams. Now all I have to do is multiply this 1/4 times 3. And if I do that times 3, I also have to do this one times 3. So 32 times 3 is 96. So I know that my friend would need to use 96 grams of sugar for his recipe. Over here you see I have the proportion set up as well, and you can do the same thing. You have to figure out that 1 divided by what equals 3/4, and then 128 divided by the same thing is going to equal the number of grams. Since we've done our algebra unit, I thought, well, we can probably use some of our equation solving skills to figure out how to do these unit conversions. So if my question here is how many kilograms is equivalent to 200 pounds, obviously I could set up my ratio table. Oops, sorry. I could set up my ratio table just like we've done before, and I could do, well, if I have kilograms here and I have pounds here, I could just say, well, I know 200 pounds. How many kilos is that? Well, I need to look up, and here's my unit rate, but I know 1 kilogram is 2.2. So then I need to figure out, how do I get from here to here? So that's one way to do it, but that's looking a little messy to me, because I didn't look up what is 1 pound, how many is 1 pound per kilogram, which I could have done. It just wasn't the information I found. So if I set up my original unit, which I was given here, is 200 pounds. So you'll see that this is the measurement I was given, 200 pounds. And then I'm going to multiply it by a fancy one. Remember, a fancy one is when you have your numerator and your denominator exactly the same. It's just a proportion, or it's just a unit rate. That's all it is. Where I know that 1 kilogram is equivalent to 2.2 pounds. And I set it up this way. I always want my new units as my numerator and my original units as my denominator. And that helps for one reason. You can see that reason right here if you look here. Because when I multiply this out, 200 pounds times 1 kilogram, I get my numerator, 200 pounds times 1 kilogram, and my denominator is 2.2 pounds. Well, look what happens here when I end up with pounds over pounds. We know that anytime we have the same thing on the top and the bottom, we can just cancel it out. So now I'm left with 200 times 1 kilogram divided by 2.2. And when I do that out, I end up with 90 and 9/10 kilograms is equivalent to 200 pounds. So after you've done your little algebra here, you know that 200 pounds is equivalent to 90 and 9/10 kilograms. And the thing that's pretty cool is this always works. If you start with the measurement you're given, you multiply by your ratio or your unit rate, it's always going to give you your proportion in your new units. So let's try it here. So if we have $3 per minute, and I want to figure out how many minutes per hour that is, so right over here is what I'm trying to figure out. How many dollars per hour? I know I have $3 in 1 minute. So my unit rate that I set up was, well, how many minutes are in 1 hour? Because that's what I'm trying to get from. I'm trying to get from these minutes, and I want to get my unit into hours. So this is the unit rate that I set up, where I said, well, I know 60 minutes is equivalent to 1 hour. So that's my fancy one. So if I'm multiplying $3 times 60, I get 180. And then I end up with 1 on the bottom. These minutes cross cancel, just like when we are multiplying any other fractions. The labels of the units do the same thing as when we are multiplying any other fractions. So I end up here with $180 for 1 hour. You try the next one. Alright, so the weeks and the weeks are going to cross cancel, just like when I multiply any other fractions. I have 1 year and 2 feet. So I'm going to keep the feet as my numerator and the years as my denominator. Then I just have to multiply 2 times 52, and that is going to be the number of weeks. So that would be 104 feet per year. Let's try another one. The human heart pumps 5 quarts of blood each minute. How many liters does it pump in 1 minute then? Well, I looked up for us to see how many liters are in a quart, because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get from quarts to liters. So this is my original right here. This is what I started with. And I'm going to multiply it times my fancy one, or my unit rate. Which is hard to see, sorry. Okay, so what I'm going to cancel out, you can tell here that what cancels is the quarts and the quarts. So So I am left with 5 times 95 hundredths meters over 1 minute. When you multiply that out, you end up with 4 and 75 hundredths meters per minute. It's using everything that we've used before. We know how to multiply fractions. We know how to use our equivalent ratios. And when you put it together, it just makes this really easy to figure out. Sometimes you have to do it twice. What happens if, like this one, you're riding on a zip line, your speed is 15 miles per hour, then you want to transition from miles per hour to feet per second. So I'm switching 2 different units here. I'm going from miles to feet, and I'm going from hours to seconds. So I do it one step at a time. The first thing that I did was I went from miles into feet. So I started with my original here, which was 15 miles in 1 hour. And then I looked up my conversion on Google, and I know that 1 mile is always going to be equal to 5,280 feet. And so this way I can cross cancel the miles, and I end up with 15 times 5,280 and feet as my numerator, and I ended up with 1 hour as my denominator. So when I multiplied these two together, I ended up with 79,200 feet every hour. I'm not done yet though. So I already found how many feet it would be, but now I don't know how many seconds that would be instead of hours. So I just transferred this same thing I just got down here, and I'm just going to do the whole thing again. So now this is my original, and the 1 hour equals 3,600 seconds. This is my fancy one, or my unit rate, which I can't even make a 1 on here, sorry. So there's my unit rate. And when I multiply that out, I can cross-simplify the hours, and I end up with 79,200 feet divided by 3,600. That's going to give you 22 feet every second. Go ahead and try these two. I even found the conversion for you so that you can set up your middle fraction here. So remember, you want to put gallons so that you can cross cancel them out. So I know that 1 gallon is equivalent to 3 point, let's just go with rounding it to the nearest hundredths. So once you put that in, you can cross simplify the gallons. Nothing else cross simplifies. So you have to then multiply 42 times 3.78, and that's going to tell you how many liters per minute. Did you get 158.76? Okay, now you go ahead and do the next one. Think about what you're going to set up here as your middle ratio. You're looking at kilometers and miles. Remember, you want to put your original unit as your denominator and your new unit as your numerator. So you should have 8 and 600 miles per hour.